trying to bury until the end of the process. We always encourage our clients to be very open about not only the strengths, but also the weaknesses of the companies that they have. Because it's almost impossible that after a 3 to 6 month process, where you have investors with lawyers and accountants looking very closely at your company, that you're going to manage to cover up that type of problem. Another very important aspect, and frankly speaking, we've changed our processes, which I'll get to a bit later on, over the years to adjust to some of these factors. But we believe that in terms of transaction documentation, there's a couple of very important things you should keep in mind. The first is probably don't skimp on the lawyers. Really hire the best lawyers that you can afford, and particularly focus not on the best law firm in town, but getting a lawyer who really has significant M&A transaction experience. The second thing that we strongly advise is don't solicit lots of term sheets from potential buyers. We suggest instead that you develop a sales purchase agreement yourselves and you present it to them as a draft. And in doing that, you will, on the one hand, be forced to organize amongst yourselves your own thoughts about under what terms and conditions you'd be willing to sell your company or to raise capital. And in addition, the buyers will understand very clearly what your expectations are. And in our opinion, this greatly increases the efficiency of the entire process. And finally, and this is perhaps a minor point, but I think it was touched on, the United States is a well-known legal jurisdiction where there's a general assumption that you can get speedy justice. I would say that the United Kingdom is also another jurisdiction. Historically, Poland has had problems, but it has a stronger reputation than it used to. And I leave it to you to make local decisions about the strength of Romanian law and protecting your business interests going forward. But I do think it's important to work with a law firm that has a sophistication. If you are based in Cyprus, or you set up a holding company, or you want to do tax planning, that you work with a law firm that has significant experience in those respects. Another point and aspect from our historical experience is that you should never, ever, ever grant exclusivity. We have seen many, many companies looking for capital on the basis of 1 or 2 casual lunches, assume that they found their venture capital investor or alternatively a buyer for their company. And while it would be very nice if it worked that way, more likely than not, you will end up being disappointed if you confine your conversations to only 1 or 2 parties. In our experience, it's very difficult to judge at the beginning of a process who's actually going to end up being an investor or a buyer of any particular company. And we have seen quite a few clients come to us, or clients that, in fact, are potential clients that we decide not to work with, who have spent literally months talking with 1 party or perhaps 2 parties, only to find out after many months of negotiations that they really don't have a deal, that either because they weren't able to clearly represent what they wanted from the investor, or because the investor has changed their mind or tried to renegotiate the conditions at the last moment, they really regret not having spoken to more people throughout the process. It is an extra investment in time, and of course it seems in contradiction when I've emphasized that you still need to be running your company, that you would spend extra time talking to investors who you're not sure would actually be investors in your company. But if you do talk to only 1 or 2 people, I think you're likely to find the chances of a successful transaction to be very much diminished. And then there is a final aspect which many people forget about, but many of the transactions that you'll be doing will be signed but will require some additional conditions to completion. Sometimes you will sign a transaction where you sell your company, but you'll still need to negotiate a non-compete. Or you'll still need to negotiate your contract for the next years. Frankly speaking, we advise you do that before you sign the contract to sell your company. But nonetheless, there is often a number of legal formalities attached to actually getting the money, which is, after all, what it's all about, that are very important. So we also advise, and this comes into, again, working with a good law firm, whenever we sign a transaction and it's still subject to anti-monopoly approval, or there's a number of related documentation that still needs to be done, we advise that all those things be written down, put on a checklist, and that there's a conference call every week, literally to go over every one of those items to make sure that at the end of the day, you indeed do end up with the money, you end up with your anti-monopoly clearance approval, and you end up with the investor that you were hoping to have. Oh, it's also helpful to hire an experienced corporate finance advisor. Finally, I'll spend just a couple minutes on Credison, which was perhaps the best-known transaction that we've done in Romania. This was a company that was owned by founder management as well as Oresa Capital. It was, in fact, already a quite sizable company when we got involved. It was basically the largest consumer finance provider. It was not a bank in Romania at the time, and it grew out of a very successful retailing operation called Flanco, which I think today is publicly quoted with Flamingo on the Romanian Stock Exchange. What was very important about that process is that Oresa and management wanted to have an accelerated process. That did not mean that we avoided talking with quite a few parties. We narrowed down those parties relatively quickly, and we chose the party that we were able to negotiate with non-exclusively in a short period of time to get the deal done. I think it's fair to say after two and a half years that both Oresa and Florin Andronescu are very pleased with the sale of Credicin to Cetelem, and I also think it's fair to say, based on what I've heard from Cetelem, that they're also very, very pleased that they made that investment. Here we have a slide to give you an indication of just how many people it is that we contact in the context of looking for capital or in the context of selling a company. In fact, because it's impossible to fit all the logos in these little boxes, there in fact are more parties than you can see by way of logos here. This is a sampling of five transactions that we've been involved in, and I think it very much illustrates the point that I was making to you. We believe that you should start your discussions with an awful lot of parties. You should send a teaser, a very detailed teaser, to them so that they fully understand the company and the opportunity. And we also think it's helpful that quite a bit of detail be provided early on. One mistake entrepreneurs sometimes make is that they think everything about their company is a very big secret, when in fact, I think most of the venture capital community here will agree with me, there are usually just 2, 3, or maybe 4 things, intellectual property or some other very specific items about a company which make it truly unique. Much of the other information about your company you can quite safely give to potential investors without a significant risk that it will somehow damage your interests. We have revised our processes, as I said. Historically, you would have been told you should send out a teaser, sign a confidentiality agreement, get a term sheet signed, talk with several buyers. If they seem interested, you should put together a data room. And then if the data room goes well, you would start to draft sales purchase agreement. And after many, many months, you would hopefully close a transaction. We ourselves have revised our processes, and after sending out a teaser and getting an NDA signed, we simply encourage people to come for a quite lengthy management presentation. The reason we do that is that the management presentation is an opportunity for our clients, i.e. the people who are looking for capital or the people who are selling a company, to learn an awful lot about the potential investor. If you sit for 4 or 5 hours with the potential investor across the table in an organized forum, you will have an opportunity based on just simply the questions they ask to understand much better about what they really find interesting about your company and what they think the strengths and what they think the weak points are. It's also an opportunity for you to ask them questions about why they're interested, where they would see a company like yours going, if they're putting in money, and a real opportunity to judge even by the level of seniority of the people they send to see you, how interested they truly are in your company. As opposed to sending out an 80-page information memorandum, which will take you 4 to 6 weeks to write, we really think that these management presentations are a much better way to go. And we also don't believe in signing term sheets and then asking people to come to a data room. We believe that anybody who's seriously interested in your company should spend some time in the data room getting to understand it better before they even make an offer for the company. So our processes typically involve a management presentation followed by an invitation to enter a data room. And of course, we vary the amount of information available in the data room depending upon whether we're showing information to people who would be very, very close competitors. We feel more relaxed when you're talking to venture capital or private equity guys. Typically, they're not in a position to use information to become a direct competitor to you. But nonetheless, we find it far more effective to have people attend a management presentation, to spend time in the data room, and then finally you send them a sales purchase agreement. It's a draft. and you ask them to comment on it. So rather than spend time on information memos and term sheets and signing and then negotiating and renegotiating, we strongly recommend that you send out a detailed sales purchase agreement where they can comment on all the aspects where they have difficulties, where they've already reviewed